Kyler Murray has secured the bag, but only if he studies. That more today on the Dynasty Newsletter. I'm your host, Adam Wilde, joined by my co-host, Chris Allen. Chris, Kyler Murray, we've got weird quarterback signings. We've got Lamar Jackson looming. We've got Kyler Murray, who came in strong this offseason with deleting all of the photos of Arizona and unfollowing them, and then so we got some tweets from his agent, and then nothing. We didn't hear anything for a while, and now he's signed. So let's talk about him being signed and the fact that he is a top 5 dynasty quarterback, and then we'll discuss his homework. What do you think about Kyler Murray's dynasty value?
I mean, he's locked up as a top 5 dynasty quarterback for the foreseeable future. And you and I think we had this like conversation via text, like almost immediately after it signed, is that I think the biggest question that I have regarding Kyler Murray is the exact same question I have surrounding the entire Cardinals organization. Like what is the long-term plan? Because if you had to stop and think what are the building blocks for the Cardinals, just their offense. Let's forget about their defense, because you could probably throw in like Budda Baker or somebody like that, like for them. But just like on their offense right now, you've got 29-year-old DeAndre Hopkins, 32-year-old, 33-year-old AJ Green.
I think 34, actually.
You're probably right. And so they lose Christian Kirk, bring in Marquise Brown. So okay, but do you really consider Marquise Brown to be a building block like for your team? How old is Zach Ertz? 30, 31?
Yeah, he's got to be like 31, and then
James
Brown
Conner
signed for a 2-year, I think. So
right. So it's like, what are the building blocks of this offense? And so for almost every other top 5 dynasty quarterback at this point, and you can like swap around like all of the quarterbacks that you might want to, like whether if you want to include Joe Burrow in there, you obviously know like what pass catchers are attached to that particular quarterback. He's got Jamar Chase, T. Higgins for the foreseeable future. We'll see about what that contract negotiation is going to look like when all 3 of those contracts that come due, because Cincinnati's going to have to pay the piper at some point. Justin Herbert, we know at least what they're trying to do right now with trying to accelerate their timeline as a franchise, but he's still got Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, Josh Palmer, if you're into that, like so on and so forth, Austin Eckler, blah, 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 blah. Patrick Mahomes, he doesn't have Tyreek Hill, but he still has a gaggle of other wide receivers, like Justin Ross, rest in peace, but still Sky Moore, Juju, Kelsey, blah, blah, blah. I mean, but just every other quarterback has at least some sort of like pass catching option or top pass catching option to go with them. And with Kyler Murray, while he has DeAndre Hopkins for right now, for this season, sure, minus 6 games, obviously. But next year? Okay. Then the year after that, AJ Green, by that point, his contract is off and he's essentially going to hang him up, I would assume at that point. And the team with their cash flow issues at the moment, paying out these contracts, and not just the players on the offensive side, but the defensive side as well. What is this roster going to look like throughout the years that they're going to be paying him? What was on average like $50 million like per year?
Yeah.
So it's like, what is this team going to look like? So while I do think from a I guess a schematic standpoint, because not only has Kyler been extended, they already extended Cliff, they already extended Steve Keim as well. So this nucleus of the Arizona Cardinals offense is now pretty much in lock for the foreseeable future, which is good for Dynasty. But again, my only question at this point is what type of product are they going to put on the field? Is this going to be a product that is going to be fantasy friendly? Probably for Kyler, with his mobility, he still has the youth and the agility and the wherewithal in order to know how to essentially protect himself, like when he does go out and scramble the same way like Lamar does. But where is the volume from a yardage standpoint, passing yardage standpoint, going to come from in the future? And that's my biggest question mark. But the assumption should be that Kyler should have some input, I would assume, at this point, now that he's gotten his extension. We've seen that in the past with a number of other top quarterbacks having a say in how the team is constructed, at least how the offense is constructed around them. So the hope is that he would have some say there, but also Kingsbury constructing the offense like around Kyler. We've seen like how that's, I don't know, it's had its highs and it's had its lows, being more of like the horizontal raid than the vertical raid that we expected it to be. But again, like what is that personnel going to look like as they attempt to flush out some of these contracts and bring in some younger talent? It's like that's really my struggle at this point. But Kyler, with his ability not just as a passer but also as a rusher, getting the extension, being connected with at least a stable coaching offense. We can debate the merits of how effective it's been, but at least he's connected to Cliff Kingsbury for the foreseeable future. So all of that at least leads me to believe that yes, he was in the top 5 from a dynasty standpoint beforehand. He's definitely locked into it at this point now with the extension.
All right, let's bring the title into the discussion. So Kyler Murray is a top 5 dynasty quarterback, and there's going to be 2 types of people when they read this title. They're going to say, obviously he's a top 5 quarterback. Yeah. Or there's going to be, he's not a top 5. Nobody's going to look at this and say, yeah, he's probably top 5. So we'll talk about a couple of the names that some people are locking in the top 5. So you have Joe Burrow, which is fine. Love Joe Burrow, my favorite quarterback. There's going to be a picture of him right there when it gets in the mail. And then we've got Deshaun Watson, who we don't even need to talk about it. Stop putting him in your top 5. He hasn't played football in 2 years. It might be 3. It's going to be at least 2.5, probably, if he gets 8 games. I'm assuming just 8 games. I don't think it's going to be a year at this point, which is a complete disgrace, but whatever. I don't get paid to do that. So whatever. He hasn't played in 2 years. It's going to be 2.5 at least, probably, well, maybe 3. Not putting him in the top 5. Why would you? Why would you take the chance? That's what I don't get. People are he was so good when he played. Yes, he was. Guess who also so good? Kyler Murray, Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson. They're all so good. And guess what? They've played football in the last 2 years. So stop putting Deshaun Watson in your top 5 for no reason. So that leaves us with the top 5 that we've got. So my top 5 is still Patrick Mahomes first, and then we have Josh Allen. Then I have Lamar, then I have Herbert, then I have Kyler. You have a different top 5, same people, different order, and I think that's how it is. I think the top 5, probably for the first time in like 5-6 years, they're interchangeable to me. Top 5 is, I mean, if I have Patrick Mahomes, I'm a little happier, but the difference between Patrick Mahomes isn't huge to me. Maybe there's a small tier break after the top 4 for me. And then Kyler's in like a little tier of his own. Maybe I feel a little bit better about Justin Herbert, but I feel pretty good having Kyler Murray. So you mentioned Patrick Mahomes and how he has like a conglomerate of wide receivers. That's kind of what Kyler's doing. Really the only difference, Kyler gets a plus because he rushes a lot more than Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes gets a plus because Andy Reid is his head coach and not Cliff Kingsbury. Sure. So Kingsbury gets locked up for a while. I don't know if that's good or bad. Probably good just because they have that weird connection that they've got going on. But do we really need more of the same? I mean, more of the same is just Kyler Murray making things happen on his own. Not necessarily an offense put together to make Kyler Murray thrive. It's more of just, okay, this offense works and Kyler Murray's very good. Do I think that Kyler Murray would probably be a lot better if he were coached by Andy Reid? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd probably flip the rankings, in my opinion. Patrick Mahomes, great talent, most talented quarterback in the league. Never going to take that away from him. But one thing that always changes in Dynasty is quarterback value year after year, because people want to be comfortable at quarterback, so they want to go with who they saw most recently produce. That's why Josh Allen has taken over for Patrick Mahomes. Is there a huge reason for Josh Allen to take over for Patrick Mahomes as the quarterback one? Not really. Am I going to argue about it? Not really. You know, you have to rank them in an order. You can't make them all 1A, B, C, and D. So there is a ranking, but I don't see why anybody would be discouraged from having Kyler Murray, and you would draft him in similar spots. If you're talking best ball, you're taking Patrick Mahomes in like the 40s and you're getting Kyler in like the 50s, but the only real difference is what players are you pairing them with. So in Dynasty, the values aren't going to be very different. So that leaves Kyler Murray in the top 5, very solidified. It's going to be really hard for Joe Burrow to break in. Maybe Joe Burrow should be able to rush more than he does. He is a talented rushing quarterback. He just doesn't do it. But when he scrambles, I think Joe Burrow is better than Patrick Mahomes at scrambling, and I think Patrick Mahomes is pretty good at scrambling. So that's where I am at Joe Burrow, but neither of them are Kyler Murray. That locks him in for me. So when you say well, what's the plan for the offense? I guess my rebuttal is just that they haven't really had a plan Kyler Murray's whole career, and he's just been a stud in fantasy. I mean, they clearly don't have a direction. DeAndre Hopkins, I guess, is a wash with Travis Kelce, right? I mean,
Yeah.
they're both old and really good. Like, I guess, and James Conner is kind of a wash with CEH. So, it's pretty easy actually to just put Kyler Murray in your top 5 and leave him there for a while.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. Again, it's just more of a long-term outlook than anything else. I don't think that there should be any reason to remove Kyler or ding him for that because at this point and prior to, the assumption is he didn't have any control over how the offense has been, like from a personnel standpoint, how the offense has been run. But is it possible that now that their futures, at least, short term, I guess possibly long term, let's just say long term, their long-term futures are set? Do we get I don't know, a greater commitment to trying to be a bit more creative? Do we actually see more creativity like out of this offense? I mean, do we actually see, is this the year now with both? Does it take not one, but two mega extensions for both Kyler Murray and Cliff Kingsbury for them to unlock Rondell Moore? Like, is that what had to happen in order for these things to
Yes.
happen?
I forgot to mention Rondell Moore is probably in their plans. We'll see if it works
Hopefully,
out.
yeah, hopefully they do something with him, but it's just the level of conservatism is probably the wrong word, but I know that folks listening, they probably understand what I'm saying. It's just like there's been something lacking like from that offense and just more of a, hey Kyler, like you were saying just a few minutes ago, hey Kyler, just go out and do something. Where if there was some forethought into, well, plan A isn't working, plan B's already been sniffed out, so what's the plan C? Hopefully they have that. Like they have at least some sort of design for this offense that allows them to continue to moving the ball and actually getting into the playoffs and playing, and playing better than they did just this past year. So I guess that's my concern just from a team building standpoint, from a real football standpoint, but from a fantasy football standpoint, yeah, top 5 Kyler, not going to hear any arguments from me.
I'm holding back my giggling over here because I'm thinking the meme of the alien holding the stick, poking the rock, and telling it to do something. That rock is Kyler
Pretty
Murray.
much. Well, the Rock is like him and Cliff Kingsbury because we've seen them go through these wide receiver like threes or whatever. Remember Andy? Like everyone was like so hyped about Andy Isabella, like going to the
Yeah,
Cardinals, and then
he
what
was the
happened?
112. Yeah,
Yeah, there was just like then nothing happened like afterwards, and it's just
that's
like
what I was gonna.
and it took them what? Getting Zach Ertz to actually start featuring the tight end position a bit more, even though not to say that they had just like the best like tight ends. What like Ricky Seals Jones like was there like what at the beginning
Yeah,
of his career? What Max Williams, Max with 2 X's was down there before he wound up getting put on season ending IR. So it's just, they've had these players that have flashed from a fantasy perspective beforehand, but it's never been consistent outside of the core pieces like to that offense, which has been, well, at the time it was like David Johnson, it was Kyler Murray, it's now DeAndre Hopkins since he came over from Houston. It's like those are the key pieces, and that's pretty much been it. And then Christian Kirk. But we need more. We expect more. And the
hmm
hope should be that the offense becomes a bit more, I don't know, spread so that we actually see more contributors. Like, does Antoine Wesley now see a bit more run as well? So it's just those are the questions like who are these other ancillary players that are going to be contributing to this offense now that the runway has been clear for both Cliff and Kyler to have long-term futures with this franchise. So what else falls into place now that their futures are secure?
and we'll hit on Rondell Moore because his dynasty value has taken a significant dip since last season, and
Mhm.
technically he didn't hit. Technically, his percent chance of hitting in the future is significantly lower based on his rookie
Right.
season. But I will say that it's probably a success in that he was not Andy Isabella, because Andy Isabella was
Yeah.
highly drafted, and
Yeah.
Andy Isabella did less than what Rondell Moore did last year, and
Sure.
Andy Isabella is barely hanging on to the roster, and barely hanging on to your dynasty rosters if you haven't dropped him already. So in that, Rondell Moore is uh, more successful than nothing, right? So his dynasty value shouldn't have took that much of a crater because he's going to have an opportunity the first 6 weeks to take over for a lot of what DeAndre Hopkins is going to do for the offense. I know there was a report earlier in the offseason that AJ Green and Rondell Moore were going to try, Zach Ertz and Rondell Moore were going to try to pick up the slack in some of the slot stuff that DeAndre Hopkins would have done. DeAndre Hopkins can play all over the field, but the thing is, you have AJ Green on the outside, so you're not going to really have to move him to the inside too much. So they really need to pick it up in the slot game, and that's what Rondell Moore is going to try to do. Hopefully they get more creative with him. We saw the one big play that he had was on some creativity. Other than that, it's just they really – it was really the team that needed to get him going. I don't feel like Rondell Moore really let us down so much as the team underutilized him. I think he's going to be a good player. They just have to realize he's not a regular wide receiver. So it's going to bring us into James Robinson conversation. Before we start that, just let everybody know we're not going to talk about every single player that's put on the PUP list, because going into training camp, PUP does not mean that much. As a matter of fact, it means significantly more that James Robinson was not placed on the PUP list than it means that anybody was placed on the PUP list. It's a formality in a lot of cases, and a lot of people are going to come off it in the next few days here. So James Robinson not put on the PUP list, not fully practicing with the team, but he is technically on paper practicing with the team. He's just off to the side a little bit. James Robinson has a little bit of optimism to go into week one. Maybe starting. So we disagree on James Robinson's value a little bit in best ball, but in Dynasty, you probably want him to miss a few games and then wheels up for James Robinson. So how do you feel about him missing the PUP?
No, I think that's good news for him from a health standpoint, because now we have not just one, but two now confirmed cases. Well, not confirmed, but I guess positive cases of Achilles injuries to a running back not essentially being a career ender. I guess three, if you want to throw.
Four.
I mean, you want to throw Donta Foreman in there, and also
Marlon Mack.
Yeah, so probably four. But it's just, I guess these two, like Akers, and then now James Robinson, like they're the more, I guess, high profile. Even though, I mean, the draft capital, like for each, there's just like you could not be on a different spectrum between like Cam Akers and James Robinson. But the meat of the crux of the question is, though, like, what are the expectations? And at least at this point, the expectation would be that James Robinson, if healthy, and then this is what the beat writers and even like the coaching staff have pretty much indicated.
Yeah, straight up, right out in the open.
Yeah, this was written. I think John Shipley had mentioned this, like from an interview that he had, I think around like the OTAs time frame. But the preference is James Robinson, like not from a skill, not from a skill or fantasy related perspective, but James Robinson's like pass protection is essentially what wanted him the job when he was healthy.
Yeah,
I mean, and that is something that at this point, and you have to think about this, like not just from a fantasy football standpoint, or even just like a running back standpoint. Of course, like if you're good in pass protection, the team would want to have you out there. But what is their goal for this year? Like, what is the Jaguars' goal for 2022? They need to be able to know, and like they need to be able to bring Trevor Lawrence like to the, I guess not the forefront, but at least into the conversation for one of the better quarterbacks like in the league. And if you look at all the metrics like from last year, I mean, bottom 5 in completion percentage over expectation, EPA per play, just raw completion percentage, like turnover worthy plays, like he was in like the top 10. I mean, just bad, like from top to bottom. Now you can isolate some of those stats to the side and say like, well, if your best receivers are like Laviska Shenault, who had like 10 drops like last year, Marvin Jones, who's at the tail end of his career, so on and so forth, then yeah, this is what you're going to get. But there has to be a change, like especially since Trevor Lawrence, number 1 overall pick last year, like there has to be some level of, I guess, some boost to his performance like this year. So if the whole goal is to make things easier for Trevor, make sure that the quote unquote engine of the offense and Trevor Lawrence is capable of getting going and getting that whole offense going, the team going, so on and so forth, then you would want the running back that allows that to happen, that enables that makes things easier for him because he doesn't have to worry about any of the things that would happen to happen. If somebody's blitzing or whatever, James Robinson can do that. So I get it. I 100% get it. So this is what gives Robinson's dynasty value life again. I mean, we were sitting here in December, January, thinking that, oh God, I mean, we already knew it was coming with the yet another like coaching turnover for James Robinson, yet another, this coaching staff doesn't have any allegiance to him, blah, 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 blah. His value is dead. But now we're already hearing here in July, we already know, actually even before July, like the June-ish timeframe around OTAs, there was a deference paid like towards James Robinson, which is exactly what we needed to hear. So that I'm stoked like for him. I'm definitely pumped for him. I'm skeptical. I'll just be honest. I'm skeptical about his health and like whether he can actually perform to the standard that he needs to, even for fantasy football purposes. But either way, I'm rooting for him and hope that he does it. And I think we have all the breadcrumbs that would lead us to the fact that he's the one that we should be rostering the most at this point.
Let's bring this full circle and kind of geek out on this timeline a little bit, because it's been a rough road for the Jacksonville Jaguars backfield. So Raquel Armstead was actually intended to be the starter the year that James Robinson was a UDFA. Raquel Armstead ended up getting COVID, and I'm not being hyperbolic in that there were reports that he may not make it. It was that bad for Raquel Armstead.
Yeah.
So James Robinson quite literally took the ball and ran with it. James Robinson had 2,000-yard seasons, and then we had the discussions with James Robinson where how many 1,000-yard seasons do you need to have before people stop mentioning that you're a UDFA?
All of them. They all have to be 1,000-yard seasons.
Exactly. I think you need 10 before people stop mentioning, but you're a UDFA. And that brings us to Urban Meyer drafting Travis Etienne in the first round and saying he's a satellite back. So you drafted him in the first round to be okay. And Travis Etienne, very talented running back, not just a satellite back. But the fact that Urban Meyer thought that he was just a satellite back was the writing on the wall that it was not going to work out in the first place before it even started. So then we get into a season where we're going to have Travis Etienne as a satellite back, first round pick with James Robinson. Well, unfortunately, we lose Travis Etienne. James Robinson has a productive season. Bam, lose James Robinson. So that brings us where we are now, where Travis Etienne in best ball is being drafted like 34th overall, and James Robinson is being drafted in like the 8th, 9th round. And this coaching staff, which I'm so happy that Doug Peterson's back in the league, very, very no nonsense. I think he's a productive offensive coach. I like him. Glad he's back in the league. I'm glad he's not Urban Meyer. He's been very straightforward. You can like Travis Etienne and not want to have sent the first round pick for him last year. Like, there's no reason that Doug Peterson has to abide to the fact that Travis Etienne was a first round pick last year. Travis Etienne's probably going to be really good because he is really good at football, and he's probably going to be very productive in this offense. But no one has said Travis Etienne is the starting running back for this football team. No one, no coach, no beat reporter, no nothing. But we will not flip those ADPs because Travis Etienne was drafted in the first round, and James Robinson, who has 2,000-yard seasons, was a UDFA. I just can't understand that. So now you have the Achilles injury, but you also had the Liz Frank injury for Etienne. So it's like, I mean, both of them are coming back from really tough injuries. Their ADPs in both Dynasty and Best Ball should probably be getting closer together. Now, maybe James Robinson just doesn't come along properly and it's never the same again. Total possibility. And that's what we thought for a lot of running backs. That's after Deontay Foreman, we even thought that, because Deontay Foreman took forever to come back and look productive. But then you saw Deontay Foreman get opportunity last year. He didn't look that far off from Derrick Henry at times. So I mean, I don't think that it's a death sentence anymore. Cam Akers, very valiant effort, came back after like 5-6 months. Wasn't great, right? But your team's in the playoffs, man. If you can play, you play. Like, people want to look at the 2.5 yards per carry. It's 2022 and we're still citing yards per carry. People want to look at Cam Akers' yards per carry in the playoffs and say that, you know, he's not going to have it. Maybe he's not going to have it this year. So Cam Akers is like a 3rd round pick. But he came back because his team was in the playoffs trying to go win a Super Bowl, which they did win, which he participated in. So it's like, do you think that if you talk to Cam Akers, he was like, I'm 100%? Probably not. He knew he wasn't 100%. The team knew he wasn't 100%. You cannot hold the 2.5 yards per carry K-makers back. And I don't think that we need to hold James Robinson back too immensely. I do think his ADP will come up since he missed the pup, maybe a couple rounds. But moral of the story, this rant means throw some respect on James Robinson's name and bring those ADPs a little bit closer together. So we're going to have one more conversation today. First, before we get to that depressing news, we are coming to you from the Footballguys newsletter. It'll come straight to your email. If you subscribe to that, it'll be coming from Joe Bryant, Cecil Lammy, Sigmund Bloom, some great minds putting together some great content to update you guys right in your email. We will be getting a lot more news coming up. Right now, all the news is just like this guy is on the pup, this guy's on the pup. That's important. That's something to monitor, but they will throw anybody on the pup right now. I know it's fresh every year, but I don't think that it's super important to look at the pup list right now. We do have John Metchie, who he's got cancer. I just flat out say it. I mean, he's got leukemia. We talk about injuries a lot on this show, but this is a real one, man. So what do you even do to his dynasty value?
Nothing at this point. I mean, what are the expectations? And actually, even looking at it, the fantasy portion of it, it's say he returns in 2023, all's well, clean bill of health, and he's ready to resume football activities. Let's say springtime next year. Looking at the positives, he has leukemia. But I mean, the timeline allows him to be at least away from football, off his legs, and then he'll be another year removed, like from the torn ACL. One positive. Other positive, I mean, we'll have at least some. Let's say we'll have at least some idea of what the other pass catchers are in their development. Of course, now with Metchie going down, everybody's glomming on to Nico Collins. We'll see. He's in his second year. So we'll see what he's going to be looking like in his development as well, and seeing if he's able to actually blossom into a wide receiver 2 alongside Brandon Cooks. Brandon Cooks, he signed through the 2023 season, if memory serves. So, I mean, we should at least have an established wide receiver 1 on that offense, albeit getting towards the tail end of his career. But at the very least, you should at least have some sort of veteran presence there in the locker room to help get him back up to speed. So again, that's another point in his favor. And of course, the big kicker in his favor is the fact that with the Deshaun Watson trade, the Texans have just multiple rounds, multiple pieces of ammunition in order to go out and continue to bolster that entire franchise. I think we were looking at it before we started recording. Just in 2023 alone, they have an extra first and third. So that gives them some flexibility. It gives them some opportunity in order to continue to, like I said, bolster the offensive line. I mean, bring in whatever they need in order to, continue to move past the Deshaun Watson era, in Houston. Hopefully it doesn't mean they draft another wide receiver, but you get what I'm saying. So all that being said, it's a terrible thing for that to happen to that young man. But if we can look forward into 2023 and beyond, especially just looking at 2023, there are at least a few positives to take away for right now. And for the cost for Metchie in this year's rookie draft, early to mid second, somewhere in there.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I'd say mid to late, but not in the third.
Yeah, so somewhere in there. I mean, doesn't change anything, and we know, at least looking at from a historic standpoint, wide receivers do have the longevity that goes with them. And with Metchie specifically, like we just mentioned, if he has this additional time to move past the ACL tear, there's less of a concern for him to come into, let's say if this diagnosis never happened at all, would there have been a concern with him being put on the PUP list for training camp? With it, probably. Him starting off the season slow because of the late ACL tear, when he was still in college, probably. And now with this coming into 2023, we shouldn't have those concerns. I mean, they might have some others with any sort of problems or long-lasting issues from the leukemia, but at least from the physical standpoint, regarding the ACL, all of that should be past him at that point. So yeah, some positives I think that you can take away from the situation.
Yeah, when something like this happens, it just shows us how numb we are to injuries. I mean, we talk about ACL tear here and Achilles there, and when it happens, you feel bad, but it's
Yeah.
not like the players are getting paid and they're in a violent game, so we become dumb to it because it's expected to happen. Now you already feel bad for Metchie because he wasn't making money when he tore his ACL, so I feel bad for the college guys who tear their ACLs. They have these lasting injuries that affect their draft stock because that affects their money. At the end of the day, they're going to come back from those. At the end of the day, they knew that they were playing a violent sport. You feel bad for them, but you understand it. When a young guy comes into the league and you find out after rehabbing for this ACL injury to try to get ready for the season, has leukemia, that just hits way different. And it's like, why do I feel so bad about this one? And I don't feel well because he didn't sign up for anything that increased his chances of getting leukemia. He just got it. And that's brutal. But I mean, if you want to take if you want to take a dynasty approach out of it, to try to shed a positive light on the situation, you could trade for John Metchie, go on the ride with him. I know some of the guys that I really like. I just want them on my team. Obviously, some people would just trade him for pretty much nothing, and I don't necessarily. I mean, John Metchie said himself that it's the most curable form of cancer, and that they found it very early. So hopefully it doesn't mean a lot for his career, right? I know we were talking about Eric Berry, and he did come back. He did play decent. I think my memory's a little fogged on how well he played, but he did come back. So there is a promising story of somebody who did have cancer in the NFL.
He was a bit older at that point too, right?
And he was older. So hopefully John Metchie has a flourishing career. Look, if you want to go on the ride with him and track his, fantasy's supposed to be fun too. It's supposed to make you feel good. So go trade for John Metchie, and maybe leukemia is just a small blip on a promising career for John Metchie. At least that's what we're all hoping for. But that's going to do it for us today on the Dynasty Newsletter. Please like, subscribe, rate, review. Make sure that you're checking out the Draft Dominator coming at you soon to dominate those drafts going into this season. For myself, for Chris, we will catch y'all next time.